Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, or good night. I don't know. Maybe you're listening to this as you're falling asleep.
Maybe we're helping them to fall asleep.
There's got to be somebody out there that's like, man, those two guys just bore me to tears. I just fall asleep listening. There's got to be somebody. And if
Make
that's
sure
you, I
you're in
would
a
say let us
comfortable.
know, but you're probably already asleep.
Well, if you go back and listen to it and you remember falling asleep during it, let us know. But if you're in your car driving, don't fall asleep.
No,
We'll,
yeah, that not a good idea. Well, it is great to be with all of you on this week's episode of Rainer on Leadership. Rolling into 2024, we're going to be
wow.
talking about interim pastorates and what makes an excellent interim pastorate. But before we do, we want to thank our sponsor, California Baptist University. They've got a great program for eligible high school students. So they can earn college credit online before they go to college. And the great thing is you get to try this for free. So if you know somebody, you should point them in this direction because the first class is free. You just got to buy books and course materials. And then every other class after that is a huge discount. They take that $613 per credit hour fee down to $166 per credit hour.
Wow.
And that is a really, really good deal. Just for our listeners. So, hey, go to calbaptist.edu/PCC. Got the link in the show notes as well, calbaptist.edu/PCC. And just go see what this program is about. Students can start during any 8-week session, whether that be summer, fall, or spring. So there's lots of options. And many times students, they successfully complete courses during the normal school year. They kind of do a both and approach. So it's a
Right.
really neat program, very unique. Only California Baptist well, they're the ones we're pointing you to. So go check out the California Baptist program at calbaptist.edu/PCC. All
Sam,
right, Dad.
that
Yeah,
reminds me of that great 60s song about California Baptists. You remember
I,
that?
it,
I
it
wish
was a
they
number.
all could be California Baptist students. They all could be California. You remember that song?
That's exactly how it goes.
hmm First thing I
You know,
thought about was
there's
your
probably
voice.
some sort of licensing arrangement there that they can't claim that. But since you sing so out of tune, I don't know that the algorithms are going to pick up that
They
that
will
song was
have
actually being
no
played.
idea what I'm singing. I am out of tune, and my words are always different, so it doesn't matter. It does not matter. Hey, let's talk about interim pastorates. Let me just say a word about interim pastorates before we get into the crux of our podcast. I have been contacting different denominational groups, and these groups have several churches within their sphere. Some of them have as many as 300 or 400. Some may have 20 or 30, and I'm talking to them about the churches they serve, and these are denominational and network leaders, and they tell me about all the vacant churches they have. And I said, what are your two biggest needs? He said, well, our biggest need is to get a pastor, but for these churches, but most of these churches can't afford a full-time pastor. They need to be bivocational. I said, but at the very least, we have a huge demand, a huge need for interim pastors to fill the gap until we can figure out what to do on this. So this is not just let's talk about interim pastors. This is a whole big need in the church that's getting bigger every single day. It may be one of the most pressing needs in the aggregate of the nearly 400,000 churches in North America and perhaps beyond.
Yeah, I mean, the average age of a pastor, the median age of a pastor, let me be more specific technically here. The median age of a pastor is almost 60, if not at 60.
That's
Um,
amazing.
it's It's wild. Now, here's the thing. An older pastor generally is good for the church. There's a lot of experience. There's a lot of wisdom. I give you that stat not to say that older pastors are the problem. They aren't. In fact, many times they are of great benefit to the church. What the problem is as that average age or median age has crept upwards, it means that there's not any younger pastors taking these churches. And what that means is there's going to be a lot of retiring pastors in the next 4 or 5 years, a huge swath of pastors retiring, very few younger pastors to take these churches, which means the interim role is only going to become more and more and more important. These interim pastors are going to help us bide the time. Perhaps that's not the right phrase for this, but to give us time to figure out this pastor shortage. So, how do you solve the pastor shortage? There's a few things we need to do, but a key one is to get good interim pastors trained up, because that the need, the demand is going to be huge for this.
So let's talk about an interim pastor comes to a church, and that interim pastor has some key objectives. Let's talk about those key objectives. These objectives are almost universal in every interim situation. There may be some exception, but these are almost universal. So what is it a good interim pastor does? We talk about this. We'll talk more about our training for it, our certification called Interim Pastor University. You can see that in the show notes. We'll talk a little more about that later. But one of the first objectives is you got to teach the church that new pastor is not going to be the silver bullet for your church. That new pastor is not going to make your church 20 years younger as a median age. That new pastor is by just the pastor alone is not going to grow the church by 75% within the first 2 years. It could happen, but if you expect that interim pastor to be the answer to every need you think there is in the church, and that's all that you think will need to happen, you're wrong. The pastor is not the silver bullet. Do you know the origin of the silver bullet, Sam? I don't.
I know, what was it? The magic bullet with the Kennedy assassination?
Well, that was the magic bullet that went down, went that way, then down, then over that way and that way, and wounded two people in three different parts.
Yeah. So I don't know the etymology. Is that the right word of the phrase silver bullet? I also believe that it was a beer. Wasn't that some beer back in the day? They called it the silver bullet. Was it
I
Coors?
don't know. You might be thinking of a Coors commercial that had the
Yeah,
silver bullet
silver
train or
bullet.
something like. Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't remember, Sam, and if I did remember, I would not admit it.
Yeah. So, objective number one, back to the subject at hand. Objective number one, if you are an interim pastor, what can you do to help the church? What can you do to help the next pastor? Teach the congregation that a new pastor will not be a silver bullet. How many times have we heard churches say that are in an interim, and they say something like, well, we'll just get a younger pastor, that younger pastor will bring in younger families. Well, guess what? If you're not bringing in young families right now, the younger pastor is not going to change that. They may be
Sam,
younger, but they may
I
not bring in younger families for reasons that exist now.
I know you have watched churches die and eventually close the doors or get close to it because they keep thinking that the solution is just around the corner and it's a single person. And therefore, they're not going to do anything except look for that person. And it's a person they never find. Even if they find someone, that person is not the silver bullet.
Yeah. So if you're in an interim role, or if you find yourself in an interim role, the best thing you can do is to teach the church that a new pastor will not solve your problems. And just say that over and over again. A new pastor is not going to solve your problems.
I remember when I was interim pastor of a large church and had an executive pastor by the name of Brad Wagner. Brad was actually leading the church in the executive pastor role. And yeah, I said, look, I'm going to just be preaching here most of the time. You're actually going to be leading the church. He said, I asked him, how can I help you during this interim time? They called me the interim pastor. He had the administrative leadership. I was doing the preaching and had a little bit of vision casting going with it. He said, I want you to back me when we have to make some tough staff decisions, because we don't want to leave the next pastor to make decisions that everybody knows needs to be made. We need to make them now. So that's one thing that interim pastors can do. Many interim pastors just want to be loved and cuddled. Well, some interim pastors need to make these tough decisions to benefit the church now. So that is not the entree of the new pastor facing that kind of problem and the all the issues that come with it?
Yeah, so it's so common, particularly, and we're talking about some churches that are a little larger. I do realize that a lot of churches have a sole pastor and maybe an administrative assistant, but there are plenty of cases out there of churches that are in an interim. There is an elder board or a personnel committee or a search committee involved finding this new pastor, and then they bring on an interim to fill the pulpit, among many other things, during the season of transition. Well, what can you do if you're that interim? One of the best things you can do is to coach the church and to help them understand that if there's some things that they know that needs to happen with staff, like you need to let somebody go. Yeah, everybody understands that. Do not wait for the new person to come in and just say, well, they'll do that when they get here. Do you know how hard it is for a brand new person, week 1, week 2, month 1, month 2, and then go, well, now you need to go fire this person or these 2 people or these 3 people. It's like, great, the honeymoon just ended and I'm having to fire people that you should have done that before I got here.
Yep.
And I think that's priority, maybe not priority number 1, because I think that's teaching the church that the new pastor's not a silver bullet. I think priority number 2 is, if there are some tough staff decisions that need to be made, let the interim help lead that effort.
By the way, while you were speaking, I was listening to you. While you were speaking, I did a little research. The origin of the silver bullet comes from folklore, in that it was what was used to kill a werewolf or a vampire. And it was the only thing that could kill them, but it was a simple solution. You get a bullet made of silver, shoot them in the heart, and that is the only way that they could be killed. And I know there's other folklore about driving a stake in their heart and those type of things, but that is, at least according to one source, the origin of the silver bullet, a simple solution to a complex problem.
This has all sorts of connotations for pastors now. When we start talking about new pastors are not the silver bullet, is the church the werewolf? Is the church the vampire? Is the new pastor the werewolf? What? I mean, I'm really confused now.
And why are we on this, one of the most listened to practical church ministry podcasts in the world, talking about werewolves and vampires? I started it, I
Hey,
know.
you did. You did. All right. So, first objective, not a silver bullet. Pastors
Not
are
a
not
silver
silver
bullet.
bullets. Objective number 2, if they're tough staff decisions, please make those before the new pastor gets there. And objective number 3, let's prepare the church for a season of change. This needs to be on repeat over and over again. That when a new pastor comes in, that you're moving out of the interim, you've brought the new pastor on. This person's being onboarded. Prepare for that season of change. There will be change, and just getting the church mentally, emotionally, and spiritually prepared for change. That is a huge thing that interims can do.
Here's what I did. I have done probably 20 interims in my lifetime. I did 11 in a row when I was dean of a seminary in Louisville. And so I had one after another. Usually one would end one Sunday and another one would be waiting on me the next Sunday. So I went through a long season, over a decade of consecutive interims. I didn't do this with the first one, but by the time I got to the third one, I would have a town hall meeting. And I would bring as many of the congregation together. It would come. Typically, it was a Sunday night because I was already there for the weekend, or late Sunday afternoon, as many as possible. And I would say, I want to talk to you about change, because when your next pastor comes, you have to be ready for change. Just the pastor arriving is change in itself, much less the change that pastor will introduce. And so I said to them, are you ready for change? And I would actually get some people to vocalize it. Are you really ready for change? Oh, yeah, we're ready for change. We're ready for change. I said, okay, let's go through a mock change. I said, if the order of worship changed to this, are you ready for it? And I'd wait for reaction. If we went from traditional to blended or contemporary worship, and I would sometimes even show them some examples of that worship, would you be ready for this? If the pastor was out in the community more than keeping office hours, would you be ready for this? I would I would know before I went into that meeting what the pain points were and where they would possibly push back. And I would use that as a hypothetical. If this happened, would you be ready for it? They said it was one of the best things I did as an interim. So it's a lot better than my preaching. Set the low bar, but
I really like that exercise, and it actually connects the third objective to the fourth objective. The fourth objective is to free organizational culture as much as possible for a new vision. So what you were doing there is you were uh, preparing the soil for a new vision by getting them prepped for change without providing that vision. And that's a tough thing to do as an interim, where I'm preparing you for change and I'm going to free this organizational culture as much as I can, get that soil ready as much as possible for the new person who's going to come in to do the planting, who's going to start giving the church the new vision. One of the worst things you can do as an interim is to say, here's the new vision, because you're not going to be the one to stick
to carry
around
it.
to
Yes,
carry it
exactly.
out. And
Exactly.
actually, and then you actually make things worse, because now the new person has to come in and undo everything you did and say, no, there's another new vision. And by that time, the punch and the value and the weight of everything is lost. So please, please prepare, but don't prepare the church for a new vision, but don't provide the new vision.
And this is a good caution for pastors who are retiring that are now going to be interim pastors. It's the most common path in retirement for pastors. You may be accustomed to setting vision in a church. And so it may be just a natural default for you to say, this is the vision. Don't do that. Prepare them for a vision, but don't give them the vision, because you have no idea what God is going to do through the next pastor.
But you
Sam,
do
this
know
last,
it's not going to be you. That's the thing of an
yes,
interim. You know,
that's
the
right.
one thing you do know is it's not going to be you. So you can't be the one who does it.
Which brings up a point that we're not even throwing in here at this time, but I'll do a long parenthetical comment, and in essence this: be very careful about auditioning for the pastorate when you are an interim. If you're going to be the interim, be the interim, and don't play a game by you're getting your foot in the door while being the interim. I've seen that, and I've even had many of these pastors say, "Well, it changed. I just felt God changing my heart on that." Just be careful. I'm not going to question what God's spouts, how God is speaking to you, but be careful about coming into a church as an interim and then taking the full-time pastorate, because you know what? They will love you if they know you're going to leave. But once they know you're going to stay there, you're then going to go through the crucible at that point. It's get ready for it. Sam,
And
this
and
fifth
we're
objective.
and we're speaking from a lot of experience here and seeing these situations. Can it work out when the interim becomes the new lead pastor? It can. But more times than not, we've seen it really fall apart in bad ways. So the caution of just be careful, we can't speak of God's will, of course. I mean, we just can't. But that caution, I think, is a very wise caution.
And I will say, almost without exception, don't become an interim if that's your way to get your foot in the door to become the pastor. That is duplicitous. Uh, go through the normal path. Let's get this last one, Sam. We put several points together. Lead the church to have fun, heal, and get unified. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think all of those go together. I think if you're an interim, you should be having a lot of fun. And you should be having a lot of fun with the church. They're in a transitional time. What is a good way to prepare the culture? What is a good way to free things up? Well, fun is a good way to do that. You know who did it better than anybody else? Do you have any idea, Dad? That to have
Oh,
fun to free up the culture? Steve Drake.
hmm. Yes, he did.
He
Steve,
was such a good interim, and I know many of our listeners are like, I don't even know who that is. He's playing a lot of pickleball right now, is what he's doing. He has since retired, and I see his social media posts; it's all pickleball. But when I went to first Southern Baptist Church, Floyd's Knobs, Indiana. When I went there, he was the interim before me, and they were having so much fun. under his leadership, it was a little bit intimidating to me because I was like, man, they like love this guy. What he did was the church had split a few times before I got there. Four, actually, if you really count them, four times. And through
Wow.
that fun, he enabled, I mean, he was doing cookouts and all this stuff, just fun stuff. And the church healed up through that fun. And then because they were healing up, they were getting unified. And he did a really good job of preparing the church for my leadership. And then I came in as some young kid thinking, but it was my first full-time church. I was in my 20s. And I'm certain I undid every bit of good that he had done there. Um, but the lesson is still good. That fifth objective, lead the church to have fun, and through fun you can heal up, and through the healing process you'll get unified.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the Beach Boys or Jan and Dean that sang "Fun, Fun, Fun." I think it was the Beach Boys. We'll have fun, fun, fun. Now that Daddy took the T-Bird away.
I'm pretty sure that's the Beach Boys, but I'm not the expert in 60s music like you are.
Well, obviously, I'm not the perfect expert. I think it's the Beach Boys as well. We want to talk to you about Interim Pastor University. It is our official certification program for interim pastors. It sets you apart in this world where more and more interim pastors will be needed in order to fill all the gaps that are there, all the vacancies. We have had this certification around for several years. It is highly recognized, highly touted. It is something that we hear in multiple denominations, non-denominations as well. This is your opportunity to prepare even more so. You may already have a ministry degree. You may even have a doctorate or a master's, but this is a unique certification that says you have done the work because you love the local church. And if you're going into retirement, you want to stay in ministry, and this is the path you want to go. So we got a link to Interim Pastor certification as Interim Pastor University. You can see that in the show notes. Sam, I think it is we have several certifications, and I think it's right at a strong number 3 in our certifications. We have the big one, Church Consultation University, then Revitalization Certification, and then IPU, as we call it, on the team, Interim Pastor University. Very well received for the last several years.
I love this certification. I'm so glad we put it together. I think it's just a great resource for anybody that's either doing interims or considering interims, particularly if you're like, hey, this is going to be something I do when I retire. Now is the time to really go through it. And by the way, we've got a link in the show notes, but you can also go to interimpastor.university. We still have that domain name. So interimpastor.university. It'll take you to the certification.
I grabbed a lot of those domains when the university domain became available. So that was one way back then.
I know. I'm glad you did. We've certainly put it to good use, and I hope that this episode was a good use of your time. So, thank you again for tuning in to Rainer on Leadership. We love our listeners. We absolutely are honored that so many of you tune in every week. Whether you're watching on YouTube, it's a growing YouTube channel, and so we're glad for those of you who tune in on YouTube. But for many of you who listen via the radio, which I guess is what podcasting really is. Hey, you've been around for a while. We've got many of you have stuck with us through now well over 800 episodes. It's just incredible. So I want to thank all of you for tuning in, and we've got a really good episode coming up next week. So if you're listening to these all back to back to back, if you're traveling or whatever it is, hey, we'll see you in a minute or two. But if you're listening to these week to week, we'll see you again next week.
But I got to say something before you sign off. Got to say something.
What?
Fun, fun, fun. The Beach Boys.
Okay. I was right.
Just want everybody to know that it's fun, fun, fun by the Beach Boys. Okay. Now,
very good.
Thank you for being a part of this. I stole the thunder at the end, but thank you for being a part of it. We'll see you next week or whenever you're listening to this app. Take care.